Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. We are tenure-track faculty members in the sciences, working at a primarily undergraduate university in California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss.
Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Ruth.
And I'm Claire. And today we're going to talk about professionalism. But first, Ruth, how was your week?
My week was exciting because, in a bad way, because we had a second incident of a snake being brought in by the cats. Yes,
it's becoming a theme.
It is becoming a theme, and it's not something I thought I would have to deal with. My kids were like, "We've never seen you move so fast," because I leaped onto the couch with a lot of agility. I kind of have a theory that it might have been the first snake.
Again?
Yeah, I'm convinced because my husband, when he threw it away in the middle of his meeting, it was near the open garage. So I sort of had this story in my head that the snake has been living in the garage, and I feel this might have proven me right. So that was exciting and distressing. And again, lucky that it hasn't happened while I was teaching on Zoom yet. But
now, do you think if this happened a third time, you'd start to feel less animosity towards the snake, or is it getting more animosity towards the snake?
I feel like, because animosity, it's more like complete terror.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? But I hear what you're saying, because Eric picked it up and was hanging out with it for a while, looking at it, and I was just like, if you don't get that thing out of the house, we're done. You have to get this snake out of here. So yeah, and I don't think I'm quite in the rational mind space yet, but maybe we'll find out as this continues to happen.
Yeah.
Apparently a lot. So yeah. How about you? How was your week?
It was good. I wanted to report about this new show that we watched that I'm super into, which is called Legacies. Have you heard of it?
No.
It's
I'm super excited about the title.
Just from the title, right? Mm-hmm. It's about the School for Supernatural People, which is werewolves and vampires.
Oh my god.
And so they've got all kinds of, teen drama is kind of the backdrop, and then there's all the magic with the werewolves, witches, and vampires, and then they have a bunch of monsters that come, and they're really, I think it's really cool. They rethink monsters that you already know about in all kinds of different stories where monsters exist, folk tales and fairy tales and all that, and they kind of rework them and do some twist or something. And anyway, I'm super into it and recommend it.
You kind of had me at teen drama, but once you start adding in monsters, I'm like, yes, absolutely.
It's fantastic.
Is it super grim? How?
No.
Okay, then I'm into it.
Yeah. I mean, there's always the evil that you're fighting, in most things like that. But no, I'm not into grim or super scary, and I was super into this.
Well, because every year we have this issue around Halloween where I love all the stuff, but I can't cope with anything scary. You know what I mean? And so trying to find, Shaun of the Dead is kind of a good Halloween movie for me, because, it's not, there's a couple of jumps, but it's not, psychologically terrifying.
Totally.
And
Yeah. I bet you'd like Legacies. Yeah.
Okay, because I'm really into that monster content, but not the, not sleeping for 4 weeks issues.
Totally.
So
me
just
neither.
that. Yeah. Cool. So do you want to give us our quote for this week?
Sure. So this is a quote from Daniel H. Pink, who wrote Drive, the Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us, which is a really good book about motivation, both for yourself and for students and anybody you're trying to motivate. So anyway, this quote is, "One source of frustration in the workplace is the frequent mismatch between what people must do and what people can do. When what they must do exceeds their capabilities, the result is anxiety. When what they must do falls short of their capabilities, the result is boredom. But when the match is just right, the results can be glorious."
Wow.
I know. And I was thinking about how, we have a lot of control in our jobs about what we must do because we set up the classes kind of how we want to. But it's totally true that if I start thinking I must make this assignment and that assignment and I have to grade this thing and there's actually not that much time to do it today, then that is anxiety. And so anyway, it's a reminder that I can control what I must do and have it align with what I can do,
It's super interesting, and it feels very timely, because I feel like everyone I'm talking to, their workload has changed a lot with this now teaching online.
Yes.
And that kind of maybe getting, I don't know, just recognizing where we need to put the line.
Yeah,
Like, oh, it's just not possible to totally recreate my entire in-person class
totally.
online. Or, like I think we talked about a little bit off air, like there's so many more things you have to explain. So what
Mm-hmm.
can you cut out? Or like if you're going to spend more time on this one, all that sort of stuff.
All that
But
sort of stuff. If you need to
yeah,
transition this assignment to being virtual, that takes the extra time. So what? Something will have to go away, or else you're just going to be anxious and not doing it all.
totally. And I feel anxious about, I've decided to not do labs every week
Mm-hmm.
for both me and the students. But then I get anxious. I'm like, oh, but this isn't exactly the same as what they usually would do. So
Sure.
yeah, but I like that quote.
Cool. So
Okay.
professionalism.
Mm-hmm.
What are you thinking about professionalism? Do you have anything you want to say before we get into what's working and what we're working on?
No, I think it's such an interesting one, and it
Uh-huh.
can be totally, yeah, it depends. And I wonder, were you? So I guess I'm thinking about it both through the lens of me and my students.
Excellent. Yeah. So yeah, what's working for you with professionalism?
I think um I'm trying to like I guess in my own head redefine it a little bit,
Okay. Okay,
and I feel
cool.
like definitely getting more comfortable with whatever my version of it is, and not trying to emulate someone else's version.
Okay. I like
Do you
it.
know?
Yeah.
And like kind of, I feel like, and I think quite a few communities can feel like the word professionalism has been like weaponized a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not exactly like me, then you're not being professional. Or it's, and I've even heard of instances where people kind of use that term against people, but it's so nebulous. And it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, we'll know it when we see it, but you're not it, that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And
Sure.
so I think that's what's working well for me, is to try and feel comfortable with my way of interacting and presenting myself in work
Mm-hmm.
as being professional,
Okay. I
and
like
sort of
that.
redefining it. And I think, like, for me, something I would really deem as professionalism is being really well prepared for class.
Yes,
And
totally.
so, like, sometimes in the past, I've worked like, am I too chatty? Is that not professional? But I kind of keep trying to come back to what my actual definition of it is. And
Okay.
like being professional and being prepared, valuing the student's time,
Oh, I love
that sort
it.
of stuff. And yeah, and then definitely I'll come to this more on the working on too, but it is tricky, right? When you like want to have like interactions with students that like you make connections,
Uh-huh.
and then where's the line, right? Because people easily fall into unprofessional interactions with students.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so I think I have a good feeling in my own head about where that is,
Okay, cool.
if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Like,
so you've got a good feeling about what it means for you to be professional, and you're working on being confident that you don't need to incorporate other people's definitions of professional in. And then you
exactly.
have a good definition yourself where that line is
Right. Yes.
between
And I think,
professional and too
yeah.
chatty.
And I think that's something I really appreciate having reflected on,
Uh-huh.
because it feels like then if someone was ever to say, oh, but that's not very professional, I think I would be able to confidently be
Sure.
like, no, I think it is, because I'm always X, Y, and Z. And
Yeah.
like with student interactions, I think the line is always, they're not your friend. Like you can be
Mm-hmm.
friendly and supportive to them, but they should never be needing to support you. You know what I mean?
That's a good point. I like that
And
line.
so
Mm-hmm.
so that's kind of what's working well for me, is getting a bit more confidence
Mm-hmm.
about believing in my own version of professionalism.
I love it. And I really
Yeah.
like those points about preparedness and about respecting their time.
Yeah,
That's
totally.
huge. I like it.
So what about for you? What's working well for you?
Well, so I wanted to say, so our university is pretty casual, both, in
Yes.
clothes, and most professors go by their first names, and so we kind of
Mm-hmm.
have a casual setting here to begin with. Um, I guess one thing that's working for me is I like to see my role as to provide an example of professional behavior for the students to
Mm.
follow. And so an example is emails. I don't mind
Oh
if students send me really casual emails, but I always reply. Well, I always is a strong word, but my goal is to always reply with, a professional email where we start off, "Hi, so and so," nice complete sentences with correct
Yeah.
capitalization, and then a nice close off. And my goal, I'm not trying to tell them they should do it differently or something, but I'm trying to provide examples so that if they are trying to write a professional email, hopefully they have that as an example in the back of their minds, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of answering a lot of things I'm thinking about for my working on.
Oh, interesting.
But yeah, I like that. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess I never talk about that directly with the students, but that's just kind of there. And then also about clothes and stuff, I because we have this casual setting, I don't think I'd want to actually be like business casual. That would be kind of out of place. But I feel like it's important for me, kind of for my confidence in running the classroom. I feel better if I'm not dressed like a slob. I feel like it's more. I'm holding the place at the front of the classroom a little bit better.
Dude, 9,000%. And I think, like, for me, I'm definitely very casual, but then I think I hadn't realized until now I'm in my pajamas at home all the time. Like, I actually did wear, like, sort of, like, not totally professional, but also not stretchy pants
Totally. Yeah,
pajamas,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I think it's really interesting, too, what you're saying about. You remember, I think I mentioned on the podcast before a book called The Professor is In.
Oh, yeah.
And it was about job interviews. And it was saying, to kind of reading the room, and they were talking about one guy who came to an interview in a full suit and sort of quickly realized this was like a little too much and sort of took off his jacket and casually like took his tie off and kind of got himself more acquainted to. But then it can go the other way, because I heard of an interview panel where somebody came here, which is quite casual, but in really, really scruffy clothes, and people felt kind of disrespected. But I think it's totally, you got to be appropriate to where you are.
Sure.
But I like having my teaching clothes too, and it feels a little bit more like putting on, like I'm not a big jewelry person, but I put on earrings every time I go to Zoom.
Oh, how nice.
It just makes me feel a little bit more like I'm getting into that headspace.
Totally.
2 minutes ago I was washing dishes, but now I'm like in my teaching, got my teaching earrings on. So
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. A slight exception is I would wear slobby clothes in the lab because I'm always getting acid spots on my pants and then they get holes and stuff. But I recently upgraded to having a lab coat so that I can not have as many holes in my pants on lab days.
Which always looks so cool. Whenever I see you in the lab coat, I'm like, yeah, like that's so awesome. I'm super into the lab coat.
Thank you.
That is cool.
Cool. So what are you working on with professionalism?
My thing I'm working on is I don't actually believe what I totally said in the first part. So like trying to really believe that and like really be comfortable with it. And it's hard. I struggle with, just having that kind of courage of my convictions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little hard too, because students have the same training I had, like people sort of believe, oh no, someone being very formal is them being professional. You know what I mean? And so sometimes students can interpret me being chatty as, oh, like she's just, so too casual. You know what I mean? And so there's a little bit of that, I think, and just kind of coming back to that over and over again and feeling good about like, nope, this is, and as we talked about, like we're coming up to tenure stuff.
Yes.
And so, I wish everyone could see Claire's face right now. But and then I get kind of fretful, like what if that showed up in some letter or something, like she's not professional enough. But I do, like I feel confident about my relationships with students that while chatty and friendly and supportive of them, it doesn't flip over into me being like them actually being my friends. Do you know what I mean?
Right. And you've got the preparedness and the respecting their time. And I would imagine maybe at the beginning of the class, it takes some people a little while to adjust to this being professional.
Totally.
Like you're not just chatting because you don't have your stuff ready to go. You're chatting as part of your dynamic in the classroom. And as the class progresses, I'm sure that they get more used to that and realize that you are prepared and you are respecting their time, and probably does help expand their view of professionalism.
Right, and it can depend, because I think I told you like a long time ago in one of our early podcasts about a student who later, she was great, and I had her in a lot of classes, and she did research with me. But she said in the first week, she was like, "Who is this person? Is this person actually capable of teaching this class?" And so it definitely, that can be tricky, and I feel it more intently at the beginning
Yes.
when you're trying to get that buy-in. And I think another thing I struggle with is, say, the emails thing for me. And it's funny because I think of myself as being super casual, but when someone writes me a really casual email, it irks me so like intensely. Like someone emailed me a while ago, like, "Get back to me ASAP," and I was like, oh, like just so irritated about it. And I think, and I like what you're saying, just like keep modeling it back, and like that's what you're supposed to do with your kids. Little children, which I'm totally unsuccessful at, but just keep modeling back. It's a bit true with the one, but so just without having to say. But sometimes students have written emails, or a student emailed me during the summer from their private email address, and it was some like not super inappropriate, but like quite silly name they'd given on their email. Like it wasn't their actual name, and I was kind of like, I managed to sort of say like, "Hey, it might be better if you actually use your," so, but I don't know how, sometimes these kids are going to go into the world of work, right? And need to behave a certain way. And
for that, yeah.
Right. And so I think kind of feeling, I wish I had a better system for kind of letting people know, hey, that's not, and we co-taught a class that was for first-time freshmen, and a lot of that was about like how to college, and and like I feel like one thing we really did was like, here's how you should address people in emails, this would be nice. And
that's true.
It's always a good idea to start calling someone professor and then ask them what they'd like to be called, and all of those kind of things.
More professional, yeah.
And I think I really appreciated that, and I thought it was super great for the students, but I don't quite know how to do that on the fly, like as situations arise when it's not like a module in a class. So
yeah, it's a good point, because my general style is the modeling, and I very rarely say something directly, but that is sometimes definitely the only way to go, and other times it might just be helpful in general to be more direct about it. So yeah, that is really interesting. When do you be direct, and how do you be direct, and how do you be direct so that you're still having a positive interaction, and it's a learning experience but not a slap on the hand,
Right. And like I definitely don't want to sort of police how people present themselves, but then there's a couple of times where you're like, oh, like if you send that email to the guy you're applying to an REU for with that silly name on it, that's not gonna show that you're, and like whatever it is. So yeah, it's a fine line.
That's interesting. So that's kind of what I'm working on too, is the balance of the professional and the relatable. So I want to have authority and respectability and all that, but I also don't want to be intimidating. And I think adding some casualness helps make me more relatable and less intimidating. And so that balance, normally the way I balance it, if we have face-to-face classes, is I'm just kind of, I wave my hands around crazily in the classroom, and I do that kind of thing. Without having that, I've kind of this semester shifted a little bit more casual in my emails. There's more exclamation points and stuff like that, which I think we touched on a while ago.
Yeah. I feel like someone should charge me for how many of them I use. It's out of control.
Yeah. So yeah, I think in order to be less intimidating and not that just scary figure at the front of the classroom, I think that being a little more casual can help with that relatability. So just where is that balance, and also how does it shift in a virtual classroom versus a face-to-face classroom is kind of what I'm working on.
Totally. And I think you're so right, because I mean, this virtual format is so difficult to get that same kind of connection, or like just that chat you have at the beginning of class.
Exactly.
And I've been doing the most awkward. Like I come on there early and I'm like, "Hey, how's it going?"
Oh,
and like someone's like on mute, and like they're not even there. You know what I mean? And like it's so awkward. But
well, that's interesting to hear. That's what you do, because I've just been like not getting there until the last minute so that they maybe.
No, I think that might be a good idea because it's just really awkward and I just make everyone uncomfortable. So they're just like, oh God, is someone going to reply to her? Because it's so embarrassing. So, yeah, maybe it's not a good thing. But I think, and I think our situations are a little different that I'm only interacting with them once a week live. And so I feel like it's so weird. The first day was so intense.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being like, wow, there's only 14 more of those to go.
That's a good point.
It's very strange. But yeah, it's weird because relatable, like I loved when we were teaching together and the kind of faces on everyone when you were like, you did a really good exercise with them with the note card and what's something you want me to know about you, and then you kind of did an example of it and we're saying like, I'm in a band and I was writing a novel, and they're all like, whoa, and like super into it. But I've been in other situations where like a professor might be like, I overhear students saying like, oh, I heard Professor so-and-so had a wild night last night and they were super hungover today, and you're like, well, that's not relatable. That's like,
that was over the line. Yeah.
Wait, yes,
Didn't
exactly,
need to
over
know
the line.
that.
And so
yeah.
But then like, because again, I think I've talked about it on here, it's not a deliberate thing because it's just I'm a chronic talker, but like I will mention like, oh yes, my kids, someone just started kindergarten this week, or like my eldest just got her glasses, and whatever it is, and just to have that bit of chat. And I do worry that sometimes people will be like, oh no, not professional.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a balance. And I think you can be more professional in one area and less in another, and it still balances out to professional and relatable. So there's lots of ways to do it and have it work out great.
Yeah. Well, I actually, the horrible process of going through your evaluations for the tenure stuff, and I kind of think it averages like once a semester or once every 2 semesters. I get one student who says, I wish the tone was less conversational in the class. And so I was kind of writing my reflection about that, and I didn't want it to sound as obnoxious, like, but it's kind of like I thought about this and the amount of students who say they really appreciated the casual atmosphere, like it sort of outweighs it. And if this student is looking for formal, they're probably going to get that elsewhere. You know what I mean? And so that sounds maybe a bit obnoxious, but I kind of literally just wrote that last night where I was like,
I mean, that's how it is with student evaluations, that some people are going to hate the same thing that the other people love, and so you can't just go by one. So if you periodically get somebody who says it's too casual, but for the most part people like it, sounds good to me. Yeah. Anyway, well, thanks for all the thoughts about professionalism. It's definitely helpful to think about it and, like you say, be intentional about what do we mean when we say professional, so that we can.
Well, I've never actually really had a colleague say anything about not being professional, but I think I definitely had a conversation with someone who was like, they're like, well, is that very professional? And it totally sent me into like, oh my God, I'm not professional. Right. And so I kind of like having a little bit more of thought about it, so that if it does come up, I'm like, wait, no, I could see how you might think that, but actually
I'm
showing a picture of my child on the first day is actually, trying to do this other thing. It's not just me being out of control.
Right. It wasn't a willy-nilly thing. It was an intentional thing, and I'm sticking behind it. Yeah.
It's not the hungover dude.
It's not the hungover dude. Yeah. You don't want to be that.
I'm glad that's my line. I'm like, have I gone over the hungover dude line? No, I'm okay. So, yeah. Well, that's awesome. Thank you, Claire. And I think I'm glad you picked this topic, especially in these new interactions that we're having.
Good. Yeah, it is. It does seem like a different way of doing it. So.
And if anybody out there has like an actual formula for how many exclamation points are too many in one email, then let us know.
We would love to know that,
that
formula.
I feel like I'm breaking that rule every day. But yeah. Cool. Thanks, Claire.
Thanks, Ruth.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener, and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.